think the more we do this, the better we're going to get at it.
Even the most senior people do struggle to talk about themselves, so having this guidance from us is really valuable.
Understanding that we need to find that kind of perfect candidate. We can't just do that just by speaking to them once and sending a CV over.
We've been thinking a lot this year about how we can better support clients through assessment and onboarding of new candidates. And a consistent complaint comes up that whilst a lot of individuals look great on paper, interview incredibly well, quite often there's a personality clash when coming into a new role. Here at Patrick Morgan, we're increasingly leveraging personality tests and most recently the Hogan Assessment to try and better understand candidates and fundamentally see how well they fit with client organizations. I brought the team together this morning to talk a little bit about what we're doing to answer that question, particularly the way we're leveraging Hogan Assessments as part of our process. I've got Connie, Louis, and James with me. To start me off, what are Hogan Assessments?
Sure, no. So the Hogan Assessments really are focused on predicting workplace performance. It is understanding an individual's way of, what their drivers are, what their values are, what makes them get out of bed in the morning, and how they're going to really react in a certain work environment, right? It really seeks to answer three key questions. What do people want? How do they get what they want? And also what can get in their way or derail them? And I think, these tests especially are really useful in kind of finding that out for the client especially.
So James, I'm a candidate in a process. I'm looking to excel and proceed in this. What do I go through? What does it look like for me?
Sure. So there's three key tests really that they do. It's a personality test. So there's first is the MVPI, which is the kind of call the inside. So that's really focused on understanding, like I said, what gets people out of bed in the morning. What are their drivers? What do they want to achieve, right? And I think that's really focused on, things, for example, is it power? Is it ambition? Is it really, trying to be the best of the best, the leader, etc.? But it also could be things like, scientific research. They want to kind of solve the world's problems and all this kind of stuff. Or it could be helping others, right? It could be being a teacher. It could be being in charities. It could be really focused on these kind of areas, right? And this really helps guide someone's view on if they can fit in a job role or not, right? So that's the first one. The second is the HPI, which is what they call the bright side. It's not Mr. Brightside. But no, the bright side really is focused on understanding, people's strengths really when they're performing at their best. So they come into the office, they're really driven, they want to reach, their values and drivers, and they're really focused on trying to succeed in what they're doing. Some people might have different strengths than others. So some people might be better suited for a role where it's very sociable. So if they have a high sociability, they can be good for sales. It could be good for, recruitment, consulting, whatever. But some people might be a bit more introverted, a bit more independent, and they might want to work in more kind of scientific roles, data-driven roles, etc. So it really is, like I said, contextual, really focused on the job and the business. But these are the kind of strengths that they kind of have and live by. The final one, the HDS, which is the dark side. It sounds quite villainous, but it's less Darth Vader from Star Wars and more Michael from The Office. It's a little bit less bad than that. But no, it really is focused on still strengths, so still things that people could be good at. But these kind of things might derail when they're under pressure, when they're stressed, when they're reaching a deadline. Even if they're really comfortable with an individual and they kind of take their monitored voice, monitored brain out and kind of not really think about it. So I think a good example probably would be diligence, right? Someone that's very diligent, very detail orientated, a perfectionist. They are usually going to be great. You want someone like that on the team. But if they're a leader, if they're working on a tight deadline, they might be so detailed, orientated, such a perfectionist that they might miss the deadline because they're so focused on it. They might not delegate effectively because they're kind of one way or the highway. Or they might micromanage. They might say, I really want to make sure this is done. You looking over your shoulder, kind of creeping over you, kind of, trying to get things done. So that's a good example on kind of how a strength can turn into something that's actually quite negative for a business. And these are the kind of things it assesses.
So how has the market changed over the past 12 months?
I think we've seen a tremendous amount of change, not in just the last 12 months, but the last kind of 4 to 5 years. The consulting industry fared quite well throughout COVID, with most industries doing very well. And as a result, we saw a lot of the market hire quite aggressively. In 2022, this has definitely changed. With the rising economic uncertainty, a lot of our clients have scaled back those hiring efforts. As a result, attrition rates have dropped, and a lot of firms are now starting to make layoffs. With this now, when our clients are hiring, we're seeing a lot more scrutiny placed on the candidates throughout the interview process, with clients really drilling into not just their technical competencies, but also their personality, their culture fit with the organisation, their leadership ability. So those softer skills, which typically are a lot more difficult to measure.
To Connie's point, about 3 years ago, we saw an uptick in our client demand for data-driven insights, which was something that we were able to deliver from our CRM, things like promotion cycles for competitor firms, compensation benchmarking, these sorts of very market-driven pieces of intelligence. But as Connie says, in the last sort of 18 months, we've seen a need to give more on the candidate side and fundamentally give more value to our clients on that in the process. So we've moved more towards, still providing those data-driven insights through Patrick Morgan insights, but also now the Hogan assessment as well.
Yeah, it's definitely not just about, just sending a CV over and hoping it will stick, right? I think we could have got away with that last year, to be honest. But this year, no. I think a lot of businesses could potentially fail if they have that kind of mindset, right? I think what really adds value to our clients, obviously for them, is really painting that picture, really getting a good understanding of the candidate. I mean, hiring slots, have decreased quite significantly this year. Companies and our clients are kind of pushing their kind of hiring, slots, to the nth degree, until they can really make sure they understand what next year could look like, right? So making sure that there is a slot, understanding that we need to find that kind of perfect candidate. We can't just do that just by speaking to them once and sending a CV over. We need to understand how they tick. We need to understand how they're going to perform, and we're going to need to understand how they can derail potentially in a stressful environment. I think that's what the Hogan assessments are really good at kind of identifying initially.
Yeah, it's definitely sophisticating our advisory and consultative approach rather than what can sometimes be quite transactional.
Yeah, I think, this is a people business, right? And I think, they're also, consulting is also a people business. And I think just having that kind of transactional value, it's going to get somewhere, but it's not going to get where we could go. And I think if we're thinking about the future of Patrick Morgan and where that could kind of lead, having that extra kind of consultative approach can really, make waves in the market and also kind of make us stand out, as well as just giving that kind of extra, flavor to the client that they can make when making their quite important decisions, especially at the partner level, but also even at the experience higher level as well.
How are we doing it? What are we trying to build, and how are we going about it?
I think we're trying to build something other than just a piece of paper and a kind of just one straightway dialogue, right? Yeah, I think we're trying to create something more 3D, three-dimensional. It's not just how people technically perform, how people work. It's really about showing that kind of full picture to the client, not just the answer to the math problem, but the working out, which I think we always like to kind of utilize when speaking to our clients. I think that's what we do maybe better than others, and maybe why we're a little bit different, right? I think, showing that problem, showing the maths, it is really key, especially in our industry where our clients kind of strive on that and live that kind of mindset as well, right? I think where you can go more forward is we can apply this to our current product, our current search process, but also, like you were saying, additional kind of products referencing, especially with candidates that are not, from us, it's giving that kind of third-party understanding. And I think more and more clients ask us questions, when you compare it to 2 years ago where, we were not very well known and we were trying to, make our way and, make some, waves of, clients say, James or Louis or Connie, what are your thoughts here? What are you seeing in the market? What trends are you seeing? And more we're seeing that. And I think having that understanding, having those trends, but also that kind of assessment side as well, just gives that extra oomph.
Yeah, it's also, something that we pride ourselves on as a business, and you kind of alluded to it there, is how do we differentiate ourselves from this market that's, becoming increasingly saturated? And something we pride ourselves on is the support with diverse hires and diversity and inclusion within everything that we do. And fundamentally, the Hogan really is removing a certain barrier from that, because in every way, basing an assessment on someone's personality, beyond their academic background, beyond their previous employment, is fundamentally removing that barrier and providing, full clarity on the individual and how they can add value from a culture perspective, from a leadership perspective. And I think that, as we alluded to earlier on, is really fundamentally how we're differentiating ourselves and creating that consultative relationship with our clients.
Yeah, it's an interesting point on diversity. It's definitely enabling us to have better conversations with our clients about, is their hiring process diverse? Are they encouraging a diverse set of candidates? So it's nice to have that data to encourage those conversations.
Yeah, and a full consistent set of data every time, which is something that, maybe 5-6 years ago was not what we had access to, but now it's like, here we go, all of our data for every candidate we speak to and every candidate in the process.
It's comparative, isn't it? We can begin to start mapping out what different organizations, cultures look like, and therefore what candidates fit what.
Sorry, just on that, I think as well, when thinking about people from a direct competitor making a lateral move, and the key question really is, different kind of color logo or something like that. It really comes down at the end of the day to the culture, right? And having that understanding, what's the difference between the MBB firms, what's the difference between the big four, what makes them tick, what makes them slightly different to the others. Understanding that, having that as a data set, and obviously utilizing that forward into kind of trends, I think is really powerful, to be honest, in our industry.
So what does this look like? I mean, have we had positive results from clients, and what improvement does this deliver to them in real terms?
Something that we've seen, again, Connie spoke about it earlier on, is this idea of not just providing a strong candidate and not just providing a CV, James, as you mentioned before, but it's also about supporting the client in helping them shape their onboarding process. So the post-placement support that we can give them, and they can really use this data to create a tailored, bespoke onboarding process, particularly when you're thinking about, senior individuals, 20 plus years of experience in the consulting market. How can that individual come in and immediately leverage their network? How can they leverage their leadership skills to build teams, to win business? And, that is something that we've seen, specifically coming out of this. But I think there's still ways to go with it, right? I mean, fundamentally, it's a product that we've been selling recently, but giving this as a standard product and service to all of our clients and creating kind of consistent sets across all of our clients is something that we're looking to achieve going forward for sure.
Yeah, I think as well the candidate community, right? I don't think it's just for the clients. I think we can utilize the Hogan assessments for both experienced hires as well as partner hires, and even partners in the market if they're kind of getting a view on what makes me stand out. How can I how can I add to my business case? And also if the clients say, we really need a bit of extra help just to get this person across the line, what can they do to achieve that? We can definitely be part of that conversation as well, and really be a partner basically with our client, and also I guess on the candidate side as well. I think that's quite important to highlight.
Yeah, I think it's a really powerful thing being able to talk about your motivators and drivers with a third party to help you present yourself in an interview process. And even the most senior people do struggle to talk about themselves, so having this guidance from us is really valuable.
I think personality also predicates performance a bit, right? I think we see the difference in a highly qualified individual in an environment that matches them versus not. And I think in actual terms, what that looks like is less turnover of staff that are placed, better performance, and just a lot more confidence and shorter decision times in recruitment processes.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, Connie, you were talking about it the other day, about how this just like cut the process in half time-wise.
Yeah, I think the level of sophistication you'd need as an interviewer to draw this data and these insights versus what these set of questions can do from a Hogan assessment is quite fascinating, really. So yeah, the time saved is definitely a benefit.
I think as well for onboarding, especially for partner hires, but even experienced hires, for them to come in and quickly make an impact is more important now, I think, in this kind of economic situation. So, having the ability to understand what might their weaknesses be, or areas of development at least, and also their strengths, right? I think having that in more detail of that can help them kind of focus the kind of more tailored kind of onboarding approach to, really help them develop to kind of where they need to be in year 2, year 3.
So how does this look in the future then? How is it going to implicate our processes and just generally the way that recruitment begins to be done?
I think from I guess how we work as a business, I think it's going to make us, again, as I mentioned before, just a kind of more of a full service offering, maybe than just kind of trying to just do one thing. I think we can really create a full package to a client that can add a lot of value. I guess the future and kind of what that could look like. I know we had a recent conversation about this, about gamification and kind of what the more junior people are doing, but I think that can be probably applied more, right?
Yeah, I mean, the big consulting firms consistently talk about how they're moving towards a more diverse and equitable environment, and that starts right at the graduate level. So we're talking about what you mentioned before, so this idea of like the big four using sort of game-based assessments to remove the barriers, and that's for anyone post high school diploma, post A-levels, post university as well, but really removing the barriers at that level. I mean, I think something that is important to remember is that there will always be people working with people, so we've got to kind of remember that people element of it. So I don't think we're ever going to remove all of that, but I think what we're moving towards fundamentally is an environment where we have the most diverse and inclusive environments for our clients, especially as they move towards more like driving their cultural values, all of the businesses. So I think that's what it's going to look like in the future.
Yeah, I think that highlight a good point there is that we're a kind of professional services firm focused on hiring into professional services, which is quite a unique opportunity for us to understand that people matter, right? And you can chuck any buzzword in there, AI, generative AI, gamification, whatever. But at the same time, at the end of the day, in our clients, it's the partners really that are driving the business. It's the teams that are trying to develop to that. And then from our side, it's the same, right? We're trying to build relationships here. We're trying to create something and obviously scale this business as well, right? So, you can throw everything at it, but at the end of the day, it's always going to be the people that are going to make the most impact.
Mm. Why personality tests then, just to sort of go back a step, as opposed to other forms, aptitude tests, for example, and any thoughts on specifically why the Hogan? Are we thinking about others as well?
I think what really makes Hogan interesting is, again, is what I mentioned before. It's not looking at the, someone's own view of themselves. It's the reputation. And I think with professional services especially is, like I said before, reputation is key. If you are a partner that has a bad, kind of view in the, has a bad view in the market, no one's going to work with you. When you pitch and you're not doing it effectively and you're not utilizing your team well enough, you're not going to win the pitch, right? It's these kind of insights that we can give to a client can really make sure that they make the right hire. And I also think, we can implement other kind of cognitive-based kind of testing, but I think quite a lot of firms already do kind of, numerical cognitive kind of tests, where realistically what we're giving is something that not a lot of firms can really give. And also one that can not just do really senior hires, but also that experienced hire bracket as well, where I think a lot of businesses do struggle in getting people across. I think it's not just at the senior level, it's also the delivery side.
I think as well, to your point, James, around why personality tests rather than cognitive assessment tests. I think what we're doing is, you think about those tests that are very qualitative or quantitative and test your cognitive ability. They're often not necessarily accessible for every candidate that we may encounter, and particularly, as I was mentioning before, as these firms move towards total diversity, not just in terms of race and gender identity, but also more in terms of background, education, academic diversity as well, diversity of thought. Fundamentally, we're going to have to find a way of breaking down the barriers that, in terms of like a private and a public schooling system, where some candidates may have further access to support for certain cognitive tests that others may not. So a personality test is really about breaking that down and saying, okay, how does this individual perform at a personality level rather than how they can prepare for a test, for example.
Yeah, and linking back to what James said earlier about context being so key here, there is no right or wrong with the Hogan assessment. It's more about what culture you align best with.
Yeah, definitely, especially the job, right? I think, again, there's, a different firm has a different kind of culture and way they work. And even your interview earlier, with Logan is kind of, the similar kind of story. But then when thinking about the job itself, right, there's going to be different kind of expectations for certain roles. You know, some are going to be more data driven, some are going to be more kind of sales orientated. And you can teach that, but at the same time, if you can see those natural drivers early on, that's obviously going to be quite advantageous for that individual and also for the client to see.
You've got a winner, you know, you can see the winners early on.
So guys, to conclude, personal thoughts on Hogan Assessments. Why are we excited about it? What do we think it can deliver?
I mean, I think the key thing for me is, you know, in our job, we need to be out in the market. We need to be speaking to people, right, and building relationships. And I think being able to sit down with a candidate and actually really go through their drivers, that how they work, how they tick, I think that's going to really help in building that really strong relationship with individuals. You know, going out into the market, you know, speaking with these really senior individuals and really talking about their career development and their development more generally, I think is going to be really powerful, and really kind of strengthens our kind of trust to the client as well. I think if we really understand how people tick, it's going to make our clients really happy, I think.
So, James, to your point, I think, you know, it really cements our position in the market as a boutique headhunting firm. And it's also, you know, on the client side as well as the candidate side, we're really creating a new go-to-market proposition for us, as well as our executive search services. We now, you know, have Patrick Morgan Insights. We now have our leadership advisory, and it's just really, in my opinion, cementing us as a major player in the space that we operate in. So I think that's really valuable for us.
Especially when the executive search market is so saturated. There's thousands and thousands of firms. So the fact that we have this in-house capability to provide this assessment is extremely valuable.
It's probably cheaper as well overall for the client, which is good if we can kind of provide that all in one go, compared to a full service offering, a one-stop shop. Just so, you know, again, we can kind of provide that and again kind of work across that kind of executive value chain.
And I think providing that consultative approach as well, we've already seen with the numbers that our candidates are staying in these positions, the turnover is much lower, and us being able to offer that service is extremely valuable.
I think the more we do this, the better we're going to get at it, because we're going to understand what works in different contexts. And I think for both clients and candidates, it's going to become much easier for us to predict the likelihood of success of someone going into a role. So I'm really excited to build out our, I guess, database of personality assessments and just understand what works where and use that to help clients make better decisions.